later. Welcome to episode 128 of Beer with Strangers. I'm your host, Tony Russo, and I'm joined this week, as I'm joined each week, by
Doug Griffith, Stream Brewing Supplies. And the weather report today is lovely. Sunny today, although it's a little overcast, but still sunny, about 72, which we just had our beer tasting outside, and it was so nice outside.
It's nice to get outside. This is one of those days where when I go back home, I'll drag my computer out in the backyard and I'll write out there. Sometimes
Great inspiration.
It's the inspiration to keep writing as well as I can, so I don't have to get a job where I'm stuck inside. We have all sorts of fun stuff to talk about this week. First of all, Love on Tap. I'm sorry. First of all. If you want, we do a tasting every week at about 12 o'clock. We usually do it on my personal website, the Tony Russo writer page, or on the Beer with Strangers page, depending upon which one I remember to put it on. But they're all on the Beer with Strangers YouTube, and we would love it if you subscribe to that, because we do the videos on there for the tastings, and we'll also upload this video there eventually. And then, like, when Doug does classes and stuff, and we'll get to that in a second. But first of all, let's go over, you have classes coming up this week.
Yes, we do. Well, this week is actually not a class, but we've got a winemakers get-together. We usually do this every winter, sometime in February, and that's this Saturday, starting about 5 o'clock. We'll have some hors d'oeuvres and some wines to taste, and invite our customers to bring their wines for other people to taste. And if you're not a winemaker, you're welcome to come. So please join us this Saturday starting at 5 o'clock.
And then later in the month, we were talking about this before, they're going to have a Grainfather event. And it's the day after St. Patrick's Day. So you get up late, have yourself something greasy for breakfast, and then come on out to that. You want to talk a little bit about the Grainfather?
Yeah, the Grainfather actually is on the 18th of March, and we'll do a brew starting at 12 o'clock, runs usually 12 to 4. We walk through, actually not walk through, we actually do a brew on the Grainfather. So we'd like to have you all come if there's any interest in talking about all grain brewing or finding out what the Grainfather is all about. Glad to have you. Going back to beginning of March 4th, we have everything you wanted to ask a beer judge. We've got Jimmy Kroom, who is a beer judge with BJCP, and he's currently president of the local homebrew club, Meet Dogfish. But he's coming to answer any questions you want about how beers are judged and what's all involved with becoming a judge if you're interested in doing that. Another thing we're having, March 25th, we're having an all-grain brew day in Millsboro. This is what we used to have a couple times a year, but we haven't done it since we opened the store here, so we're having one March 28th in Millsboro.
Very cool. I want to talk about the beer judge thing real quick. That's one of those things where even if you're just interested in improving the way you taste craft beer, you can come and you can learn like that. There are things that they look for. It doesn't make a beer better or worse, but they do have a list of what a certain type of beer should taste like. And someone asked me about learning to taste beers, and like, what's the best way to learn to taste beers? I'm like, the best way is to sit down with someone who knows what they're talking about, and have a beer with them. And when they tell you what they taste, you remember that those words go with those tastes.
But there's a whole set of specifications for beer styles. It's the Beer Judge BJCP document that lists all the technical styles that have been established. And in each style, there is a description of what you're supposed to look for in that style. And one of the neatest things is they give you beers, usually 2 or 3 or 4 commercial beers that you can go purchase and drink to see what they're actually talking about in that beer style. So not only can you just taste your own, but you can get a commercial brewed beer that is representative of that beer style. So, and hence you learn more about it.
Right. So if you want to come out and take a listen to that it's always, whenever they have things here, it's a lot of fun. I just want to give one quick last plug. If you are listening to this on the podcast, you may not be able to get tickets, but if you're watching live, There are still a few tickets left for Love on Tap at Secrets this Saturday. It might rain, but it might be beautiful. It might rain tomorrow and then be beautiful Saturday. There's no telling.
But there's lots of space inside.
There's tons of space inside, and there are the overhangs outside, and it looks like we're going to have...
The thing with being outside this time, especially today, and I think Saturday is going to be similar to what today is, but it's really nice to be outside today.
Right, and there's lots of entertainment and food and all those things. So that's the one thing. And the other one is we also have another festival coming up in Chincoteague, and that is on April 29th. And the reason I'm telling you this now is because we've started promoting it a little bit, but the promotion's going to ramp up. But if you have the Shore Craft Beer app on your phone, you can win tickets that will include a night's stay down there at Chincoteague. You go to the different places. There's a February Love on Tap trail that we actually capped off. We have it as a 2-month thing, so it'll cap off on March 15th. And so between now and March 15th, the more places you check in, the more ballots that get entered and the greater your chances of winning. So
February is sliding by.
I won't miss it, I got to say. But the other thing is, if you come to the festival, to any of the festivals, and you check in, you're also automatically entered to win tickets to the next February or the next Shore Craft Beer event. And finally, if you check into 5, your 6th ticket is free. And I know that there are a lot of you that come to these anyway, so all you have to do is remember to check in at every one, and then we'll get you a general admission ticket to the next to the 6th one. Buy 5, get 1 free, and that's
all right.
Yeah, I would call it a 5-finger discount kind of. And so that's it for the plugs. I do want to talk a little bit about the mead event that was here on Saturday.
It was great. We had a great turnout. I think Jay gave out a lot of good information, and we actually had some cards that we made up to hand out that had the mead maker site for the BJCP location that you go and find out even more. It's a good document to read if you're really interested in making mead.
What was cool is there were so many people here, and there was a nice balance of people who knew what they were talking about and people who were just still very new at it. And so it was kind of like John was actually was obviously rather the expert. So he went through and he talked about the history of mead, and I'm going to touch it back on that again later. But he talked about the history of mead and also the practice of making mead. And then they dumped a bunch of honey in a pot and added some water.
In a bucket.
In a bucket.
So, he believes in the no boil method, so he just added the honey to the bucket and diluted it down. And
now, so the boil method, is that just to get the fermentation temperature quicker, or
no? Old method is to boil it. It was assumed that there were many impurities in the way of bacteria and wild yeast in the meads, but he thinks you lose a lot in the finer aromatics with boiling, and he doesn't see any need to really need to boil it.
So is it
even heat it really?
Does it destroy minerals or?
No, it's just the aromatics. When you heat up, it
chases them.
Chase them off.
I see.
If you want to heat it up, he says, do it to about 160, which is where most things are. It's sanitized,
right?
Not sterilized, but it's sanitized. It should kill most any bacteria or molds or yeast that are in the honey. But he just doesn't see any real need to really even heat it. He thinks it works just as well with just pouring the honey in and then using it. The bees process the honey fairly well, and generally there aren't too many things in it that will cause problems.
That aren't honey.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing that I know that many of you are familiar with this, but in case you're not, there are so many different flavors of honey, so many different flavors, right?
Well, I know you even noted today about the Zambian honey. It was made by killer bees that he was able to get some of, and he made a mead out of it, and it had notes of tobacco, and it was very dark.
It reminded me of a
very
port.
Deep flavors. Yeah.
It had a very port-like flavor, And now that Birmingham Meadery hopefully will be open soon in Lewis, but if you haven't
about a
tried
month,
mead,
so.
don't be afraid to give it a chance, because there are. I'm looking forward to having him open that just so people can taste the different. Because I've had several meads, and I don't like, just like with beer. Some of them I'm not nuts about that, but it doesn't mean I don't like mead. Just like when I try a beer, it doesn't mean I don't like beer. I don't like that
We
beer.
had, what, 15
He had
maybe
a
different meads
bunch
here?
of different
Yeah.
ones. I think we tasted 6, 5.
Yeah.
And some of them were fantastic, and some of them weren't my favorite. One of the most divisive ones I thought was that he had a cranberry one, and I could have taken or left the cranberry one, but people were going bananas for that beer. About that beer for that mead. So if you get
That's why everybody makes so many different things, because what you like may not be what I like.
right, and there's only the only way to find out is to taste everything. But B, if you don't like what you try, just keep trying, because you're going to find something. And that'll actually kind of bring us to the first to the homebrew section, because it touches a little bit on what John was talking about, but also what we're going to talk about this week, which is the traditional fermentation. What's it called? The
Spontaneous fermentation?
spontaneous fermentation.
Or wild brews.
Wild brews. So what's that all about?
Well, most home brewers don't deal with this. It's an iffy thing in a way, because no matter how many times you do it, you're going to have failures here or there.
And now what is spontaneous?
It's just putting, basically you make your beer and stick it outside for a period of time. Generally, it's commercially they put it into what they call a cool ship, generally in a tower somewhere above the brewery. It was originally they were all copper. Nowadays, the people that do it, or the breweries that do it, probably would have some kind of a stainless steel fixture. But it was generally a tub or a tray that holds the beer, allows it to cool. In the cooling process, it's open to the outside, though it's undercover, but it's got louvers and screens, so you keep the birds out and the bugs out.
Right.
But all that little, the microbes, the bacteria, and the yeast find their way in, right. And some of it may be just on the building itself, but it gets inoculated with that, and then it goes through fermentation. Now, that fermentation may take up to a year to year and a half, because each thing takes a period of time. They change the characteristics of the beer, so it's more inducive to the next bug to grow, but it produces very good, hopefully very good flavors. And what I meant by failures, especially around here where you don't know what is in the air, what effect you're going to have, you may have one time it may be good, the next time it may be bad, or vice versa.
Well, and with older breweries, they know what kind of wort to make based on the kind of beer that they're going to get, because eventually you get a sense of what yeasts are kind of floating around in the area, like the grape yeasts on like the yeast on grapes. Eventually, it tends to be the same, and
right. And with grapes, generally the wineries have taken the what they call the gross lees, what is at the bottom of the tank after fermentation is done, and they put it back on the field. It's good for the vines, and over time, that good yeast outnumbers the bad yeast.
And that's what you get. And so with beer, it's the same way. It's just a little bit more iffy. I can't. I don't know if we have a home brewer friend, Mike Boney, who's a yeast.
He's a microbiologist. Yeah.
Microbiologist, and he collected yeast out of his backyard, and he made beer with it, and it was like a brand new yeast that no one has ever seen before. And we've done that show already, but that's I guess if he had left his beer out for long enough, it eventually would have gotten that one.
You don't know. They don't know. Now, about 5 years ago, Dogfish did the same thing. They went to Pfeiffer's orchard up close to Dover, and they pulled a lot of things off fruit up there, and they cultured things up from a single cell and did some testing, and they ended up with one that was acceptable. It made a halfway decent beer, and we actually had some of those which we were able to pass out to some of our customers. But it actually fermented well and had a decent flavor. So
and that's the thing. That's the dicey part about it. You never know what's going to happen, and that's what brings it back to John's talk. Was he was talking about that very thing, like. That's what mead makers eventually got away from in the early days when they didn't have any choice or really even a good understanding about what was happening. They were throwing the entire hive in a boiling pot of water and hoping for the best. There was lots of good history that he gave there, but it's interesting that we tried so hard to nail down what yeast is going to do what for so many thousands of years, and now we're like, hey, let's go find those yeasts that we used to hate in beer and start making beer with them now.
Well, I think one of the reasons they kind to get structured and use good yeasts is you know what the outcome's going to be. So it ends up being a lot of effort and money if it doesn't turn out well. So, but as we know. Burley Oak does a lot of Steyr beers,
right?
And they turn out pretty good, and they're probably using a known bacteria or Steyr producing yeast, so they know what the results are going to be.
Right,
so.
and getting it under control is it's the biggest. It's not the biggest part, but it's a really important part of the home brewing process, because if you're gonna make the effort and you're gonna wait, especially if you're gonna bottle them and let them condition in the bottle and all those things, you want to give it. You want to have at least a better than average idea. You don't want to make 10 batches before you figure out what you're doing wrong, right?
Well, it's spontaneous means spontaneous. You don't know what the results are going to be always.
Very cool. All right, and now we're going to get to the news. This week in the news, the first thing that I want to talk about is actually I wrote an article and then someone else wrote a similar article, so I always get a kick out of that. The first article was whether beers are too hoppy. That's not really what the article was about, but that was the headline if you're following along on the blog. But what the writer was wondering about was whether our palates are changing since they just keep on upping the ante when it comes to these IPAs.
But they're also changing the methods to a certain degree. That we're getting more aromatics and less bitterness, so it's processed somewhat.
And one of the beer that we tried today, it's all gone now, was the Beer to Drink Music to 2017 by Dogfish Head, and that is it's a regular IPA. It's got kiwi and
hibiscus leaves
in it, and it's perfectly acceptable. It's not super sweet. It's not bang you over the head. There's just a little bit of character to it. And what's interesting about that is the story that I wrote this week for my Beer Perspectives column was exactly the opposite of that. And what I was wondering about is how all of these fruit beers and how all of these different rushes to what's the hot beer of the season is affecting or could affect regular, what I like to call, always have loved to call, beer flavored beers. Like, it's getting to the point where it's exotic to order an IPA or to order a pale ale or to order an English porter. Someone actually asked me, well, what about coffee stouts? And it's funny that I don't even consider coffee stout like an extreme type beer. Yeah. Coffee stout is just like a regular. Like there's coffee.
And they've been done for quite a while.
Yeah, they've been done for so long. And I'm not saying that I don't like new things, but I am saying that don't forget to. If you're watching this and if you read the kind of things that I write, then you also, like, people also ask you what you've been drinking, and don't forget to every now and then say, you know what, I'm drinking just a regular pale ale. I went and I got a 6-pack of Sierra Nevada pale ale, or in my case, a 6-pack of Shorebreak pale ale, and I drank it because it's nice and easy on the palate. It's easy to drink, and it complements the food in a really predictable way. It's subs and pizza and just regular beer for regular food. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm just giving you a hypocrite warning in advance. Over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be writing about different odd beers to pair with ice cream and oysters and things
I think
like that.
some of the breweries have gone from bitter, as much bitter as you can get in it, to more toward flavor and aromatics, aromas, so that they're toning down the bitterness, finding that it's not mass appeal to have it too bitter. Bitterness is fine to counteract that sweetness, but more flavor and aromas are much more enjoyable than too bitter.
And they'll appeal to more people as opposed to, like, again, appealing to 10 people, but 10 people that shout like they're 1,000 people, right? And for me, it's also kind of easy because I'm not crazy about the very bitter beers.
I think our palates have changed, and part of it is it's the progressive nature of the IPAs because of the current market.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but we're getting, like, I can imagine that some of these beers would have just been, again, the first time I had a lambic, I thought that the beer had gone bad, right? And it
had. But that's that style. It is sour.
But as we're learning what to expect, we can make better choices. And I'm just holding out hope that one of the choices we make is just a regular beer flavored beer on occasion, because those are still good beers to drink.
I agree. Yes.
There are a couple other things I want to talk about, but I want to just really quick get to the Bruges story, which is a little bit farther down, only because we've been following it for so long, and this was the first time I got to see the video of it. I don't know if you got a chance to watch it.
I didn't get to watch it.
That's fine.
I started to, then I got sidetracked.
So if you go to the Surecraft Beer blog for this episode, they did a video about what they've done in Bruges, and if you don't know, what they did in Bruges was they built a beer pipeline so that they could get the beer from the brewery to the bottling plant. Now, they had the bottling plant for a while, but we're trying to truck it out. And Bruges is, I don't know, the oldest still functioning city in Europe.
It's a typical old city where there's no real good streets. They're all cobblestone, no main thoroughfares, and I think it was just advantageous to have a pipeline go to the packaging facility to make it easier. And
what was really interesting was the way they did the pipe without hardly tearing up the street at all. They did like angular drilling. It was really a marvel of modern technology. But if you walk around Bruges, and I recommend that you do if you have the opportunity,
it's a great place to go to drink beer.
But they've got like manhole covers where you can see the pipes that are bringing the beer through. You can't see the beer, but it's just, I guess it's an access tunnel, but they have these, but they're clear, so you can just like feel like you're part of it. And everyone in town was apparently very excited for it, and a lot of people were wondering if they could run a tap down to. But the other thing that they did with that beer that I didn't know is they do bottle fermentation in that beer as well. So they send it down the pipe and then they re-ferment it, and they send an awful lot of water and cleaning supplies down the pipe. So if you get a chance to watch the video, it's fun to watch. You get to see all of the equipment, and you get to see the two different breweries, and you get to. I mean, Doug has been, I've not, but you get to see just how impossibly small those streets are. And I can't imagine, like, it was 500 beer trucks a year or something that they were filling up, and filling like tankers full of beer to bring it down, because they said that at one point there were 30 breweries in Bruges, and there's only one left because they couldn't. The beer was fine, but getting it out to people to drink was insufficient.
The old part of Bruges is very small, and it's a neat place, though.
And now I'm sorry. Now the one that's using the pipeline is now the oldest, but some other breweries have started opening up again, and I think they're doing a lot of brew pubs there, which again that makes sense all the time. That's my favorite kind of model, which is the brew pub. I'm sorry, I'm checking my notes.
Where was the one about Cantillon? I guess one of the old breweries in Belgium had moved to a new location, and they were taking scrapings from the old location and spraying it on the new buildings to make sure they had that same microflora that we were talking about.
Oh, really?
With the sour beers.
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, that was in one of your articles.
Oh, it must
our
have
regs.
been. It must have been in the spontaneous
Yeah.
brewing article because I
So-
always leave that stuff for you.
No, but they had actually taken something out of the old brewery and made sure it got on the walls and the ceiling and everything
to make
the new building. Make
to
sure
make the habitat for
Yes,
the yeast.
right.
Yeast habitat. And last but not least, we're going to talk about contracts versus co-op brewing, only because it's a story that I'm not going to get a chance to write for about 1,000 different reasons, but it's something that I want to talk about anyway. So contract brewing is when you give a guy a recipe and say, make this beer for me and I'm going to sell it. I have a clever name. I have a couple recipes. And the beer, I'm sure, is fine or not fine. But the person isn't brewing their own beer. They're having someone brew the beer for them. So there are breweries that don't have brewers or brew houses. They just have and again, the guy who's doing the national beer, he's got an office and he got the old recipes and he's having those beers made. But there's another kind which is co-op brewing where you have a brewer and recipes, but you don't have a brewery. And so you go and you brew along with several other people in kind of like the same area.
I know that's what Vince Wright does for Finn City. I mean, he does have a brewery, but it's small and closed this time of year because it's in Hooper's Restaurant. So they only brew from, I think it's April through October. And it's not big enough to do distribution. So he's contracted with somebody else. But he does go and brew the beer there, and then they handle the rest of it. They
do the bottling and things like that. And the beer is absolutely fine. And if you just Google it for a second, you'll see that a lot of times there's a little bit of looking down the nose at co-op brewing and contract brewing.
Well, I think part of that was just the big guys were trying to downplay it and say it wasn't the best way to do it. But I mean, the contract brewers, if that's their business, they want to make sure they make good beer for whoever they're making the beer for.
Absolutely. And the guys, the one that I know off the top of my head, this is where Vince does his, is at Peabody.
Yes, Baltimore.
In Baltimore. And they do about 4 or 5 different beers that I know of. They may do more. And they're all perfectly fine, good beers.
And some breweries have in the past who have had extra capacity have done that anyway, just to supplement their income.
Right. And it's not new, it's not weird, it's not strange. And anyone who tells you different is mistaken.
Yeah.
And that'll bring us to the end of the news bit. I do want to talk about the recipe. Let me make sure I got everything else taken care of. Yes. So this week's recipe.
Sounds wonderful.
It is brining lamb, which had never occurred to me.
With an IPA.
With an IPA. And one of the things, as I've mentioned before, the project is a go, and hopefully every week I can give you a little bit of update about how far I've gotten with it. But I will be doing like the world's lowest rent cooking show. And so the premise is this: not only am I not a chef, but I don't even have a nice kitchen. I mean, my kitchen's not. It has a stove, right? My pots are like, Cuisinart or whatever. I don't have high caliber pots. I don't have high caliber knives. I don't have much of a good cooking background. But the reason that I want to do this is to A, see if I can, and B, if I can, show you that like a lot of times they do these cooking shows and it's all the best ingredients and made by all the best chefs in all the best kitchens, and you wonder how it comes out in your own personal ratty kitchen. And so since I have a ratty kitchen, I'm happy to take one for the team. The premise is I'm going to be using just the local beers. So whatever beer it calls for, I'm going to choose one of the local beers and make it with that. And I may very well make chicken very soon with either an IPA or a pale ale.
I'm visualizing you getting ready to cook, and all of a sudden you're running down the street to Third Way saying, "I need a cup of beer. I need a cup of beer."
Absolutely, just run down with my growler and get it topped off. But anyway, if you cook with beer with any kind of regularity and you have any recipes that work well or that you'd like to share with us, please reach out because we would love to. We'd love to have them. We'd love to try them.
And we'd really like to try that food. If you got it made, bring it over.
And if you'd like to bring it over, that's fine. That's the other aspect of it. If I can arrange it, I'd like to I'd like to bring. I'll bring the food here. Otherwise, I'll never hear the end of it from Doug. But
that was
also,
my first question when Tony came in today. I said, "Where is it?" He said, "Where's what?" I said, "Those lamb chops you were talking about."
So we'll definitely try it here. But if I can, maybe I'll even get a chance to bring some to the brewery the brewery from which I made the beer and share some around, or maybe get one of the reps or one of the brewers to try it and see what they think of my interpretation. I was really inspired last week by the ESB Hush Puppies. That's something that I think I can do, and I think that would be very, very good.
I mean, free food's almost as good as free beer.
Yes, almost. And if you're interested in the recipes that I use, I take them all from beerandbrewing.com, and if you're an enthusiastic brewing, if you're an enthusiastic home brewer, they have plenty of recipes there and tips and tricks. And if you're an enthusiastic recipe person, they have at least one, sometimes two recipes they put out every week. And I'm going to start using theirs until I can figure out my own and think about what I like to cook and what I would like to, what beers I would like to put in the things that I cooked. But that'll bring us right up to the end of the show. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel and to subscribe on iTunes. Our iTunes have clicked up a little bit. We are working on the Beer with Strangers website. It's still ugly, but it won't be ugly forever. The shoemaker's children are barefoot. And that'll do us for this week. So until next week,
Drink what you like and be happy.
All right, folks. We'll see ya.